Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel. Can our Prime Minister be accused of jumping on the bandwagon for votes? Later on, we'll be talking about taking advantage of the summer holidays to improve your school grades. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we'll be presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. Stephen Harper's stance on the environment has he thrown in the towel and jumped on the bandwagon to garner support. Another incident has put Vision TV in the controversial spotlight, this time an offensive documentary by a Turkish author spreading propaganda against Israel. And BC is implementing a pilot project which could lead to a dramatic change in the way hospitals operate across Canada. Later on, we'll be talking about how to take advantage of the summer holidays to improve your school grades. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Rabbi Mendel Kaplan is spiritual leader of Chabad at Flamingo, and Paul McKeever is leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Christine.
A pleasure, thank you.
The first issue we're discussing, I thought it was a very interesting topic. Now, it was taken from the Western Standard, and it's entitled, "Cool It Already." Now, this article is talking about, or perhaps, should I phrase it this way, it's a critique of Stephen Harper. Darren Warren, who wrote this article, is basically accusing him of throwing in the towel and jumping on the bandwagon, and here's why. He quotes Stephen Harper as saying, quote now, "The fight against climate change has become perhaps the biggest threat to confront the future of humanity today." Although he refers to him as being both dry and devious, he's saying that there are greater issues plaguing us. Yet he has basically thrown in the towel, and perhaps to impress people for votes, he's jumped on the environmental bandwagon, which he calls an obsession and basically nonsense scientifically. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Rabbi Kaplan. What do you think?
I mean, the first thing that I have to say is you're surprised that a politician is looking for votes?
Oh, not at all.
Are you accusing a politician of being a politician?
Good point.
Of course he's looking for votes. But, I mean, what is so bad is what I would say. Yes, it's true. I think there's a great deal of hype around this global warming business. It's just not true. I don't think that it's the greatest threat. It is important for us to clean up our environment. It is important for us to take care of our children and their children. It's not a bad thing. It's going to take a lot of sacrifice for people to change the way they live. So if you're saying to people, hey, we want you to change, you have to kind of scare them into it, which is why people say the global warming is being blown out of proportion to scare everybody into change. Okay, so Stephen Harper's playing that game. I find him to be a person who really, when it comes to important issues, doesn't waver. And doesn't just follow the bandwagon. So it doesn't bother me if he's kind of jumping on the green bandwagon. What's going to be the result of that? That the Canadian government will do more to protect the environment? That it will be a little more environmentally conscious? Okay, fine. But when it comes to issues like terrorism, when it comes to issues like abusing governmental funds, I think Stephen Harper has been very strong.
Now that's a good point that you're making, because David Warren in this article, Cool It Already, tends to be giving the general feel that he's very disappointed in Stephen Harper's performance so far. Basically indicating in a nutshell, if you want to put it that way, from the climate of the article, that he's really achieved nothing much. Basically, he's just jumping on the bandwagon for votes, and he's done nothing with this minority government. What's your stand on that?
Well, I guess two things. One, it's sort of hard to do anything with a minority government.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But the other thing is, I think Stephen Harper had it right, although in that sentence I don't think he really intended what it meant. That is that the fight against global warming is one of the biggest threats facing mankind right now. I think that's true. That the fight itself against industrialism, against production, the whole idea of rationing electricity rather than producing more of it, I think these are all things that gravely threaten North American society. And I think that whether people are doing it because they believe in things that aren't things for which there is not any scientific evidence, Like, for example, the
I think
idea
it's about the bottom line. I'm going to be a little bit
Well,
cynical here. I think it's
I
about
think
the bottom
it is.
line for a lot of these people purporting this. And if you look at the general population, people generally are not willing to put their money where their mouth is.
That's true, and I think, you know, when you can get people scared about anything, we see this in the United States with, there are a lot of fears abound in the United States concerning attacks like happened in 9/11, and that is a very big motivating factor when you're trying to encourage people to surrender some of their freedoms. I think, likewise, when you tell people that, guess what, you're going to overheat the earth if you keep doing what you're doing, it becomes very easy to do things like, you know, redistribute wealth on a global scale, make places that were formerly, you know, vibrant economies into economies that are rationing, voluntarily putting their heads in nooses, and that's what you know, I really do share the author's sentiments there. It's quite unfortunate that the pressures are such that the Prime Minister felt that he should go down that road, and I think the disappointment in him personally on that count, on that issue, is fair game.
I'm not even sure he went down that road. I mean, if you look at it right from the beginning, he was being criticized no matter what he did. At first, when he did not so-called want to jump on the bandwagon, he said he had a Made in Canada plan. I don't see that he's really shifted from that so much. Now, this quote was made right at the beginning of the article.
Yeah.
A person can be quoted as saying almost anything, first of all. But when you look at his track record, he has pretty much stayed with his Made in Canada plan, and he was criticized for that. So even from that point of view, would you criticize him for jumping on the bandwagon?
I mean,
I know politicians do, but would you criticize him?
I wouldn't. I personally, I don't share that sentiment. I don't think he's a horrible guy. I think he's a very decent guy. The thing that was most outstanding to me was during the war in Lebanon last summer, where Israel was being, I felt, very, very unfairly vilified.
Yeah.
He stood his ground, and he didn't follow the politically correct route, and I had a lot of respect for him. You know, I actually had the privilege, I considered it a privilege, to introduce him at a menorah lighting ceremony on Hanukkah on Parliament Hill. And the way I introduced the Prime Minister was with a joke about something that doesn't change. And I said, I think for the first time maybe ever in this country, there's a Prime Minister who doesn't change his colors like the chameleon. Now,
That's a good point.
Is he not a politician? Sure he is. He is a politician. Politicians, to some degree, always have to pander to public opinion, to some degree. But if that's the issue that he's pandering to, I can live with it.
But would you call him devious?
No,
He has
I
this
don't think it's fair to
thoughtfulness
call a
about
guy like
him.
that devious.
He does not jump with the wind, put it that
I
way.
don't
When the
think he
media
does.
says jump, I have to credit him for that. He does not say how high. He holds to his views. He doesn't waver as much. I mean, he is a politician. He's definitely not perfect. He's going to play the political game.
He's usually very careful with his quotes, I have to tell you.
Oh, he is. He's a thoughtful man. But you know what? He has a history of that. He has a history of that,
kind of
even
like that
before becoming Prime Minister.
Yeah, but you have a totally different take on it. You see, I just could disagree with you on, like, I don't think the issue is just rationing electricity. I don't think it's only about taking freedoms away or distributing wealth. I think there are some real issues.
Oh,
look!
certainly,
I live in the city of
I agree
Vaughan,
with you.
okay,
Yeah.
and we have this. We're so green, we're glowing.
Yeah.
I have 4 different places to put my garbage, and quite frankly, it's a pain in the neck.
Sure.
I have a big family, God bless them. I have kids and everything, and I'm putting this in this box and that in that box. It's a pain in the neck. It took me time to get used to, but you know what? In the long run, I feel good about it actually. So my garbage isn't polluting the earth as much as it has to. So if that's the kind of thing that's going to get promoted, hey, I can live with that.
I suppose recycling is a whole different topic, I suppose.
But they're connected.
They are. I think there are legitimate things to address, things for which there's obvious physical evidence, like smog, pollution. Those things have to be addressed.
And he has been.
Right, but when the fact is that, oh yes, there's a correlation between temperature and historical temperature and CO2 levels, but it turns out that it's the other way around, that the heat precedes the CO2 increase by 800 years, then I say, well, the people who've been telling us that it was the other way around, that CO2 is causing increase in temperature, are trying to pull the wool over our eyes. I no longer believe them on the science, and I have to then suspect they're on a political mission, not
There's
a
global
scientific.
warming happening on Mars. How do you explain that one?
The truth is, there's got to be somewhere in the middle. You know, in the 13th century, I think they were growing grapes in England. So obviously there were cycles. That's documented.
Yes, cycles. And other scientists that are refuting this have said exactly what you said.
And all of the predictions that people have made about the world's destruction and implosion, none of them have materialized in any way, shape, or form.
No.
And another thing I want to point out to you is why I think this is a very good fight,
Yeah.
is because the free world must get off its dependency on these little countries that have tons of oil. This is the biggest problem. If there is a greatest fight, if there's truth to that quote, the only way for us to free ourselves from the noose that the entire free world is being held up by these oil-rich countries is to develop alternative sources of energy. So if that's what he meant, I'm all for it. I mean, and I think we're 30 years late on that.
Yeah. I certainly think he's right.
Yes.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think you're dead right in terms of his position and his integrity on the Middle East. He's pro-Israel, as he should be. It is the foothold of reason in the Middle East, and I think that Canada should be taking that tack. I just wish he was as true to his guns when it came to saying, you know what, the CO2 causes global warming nonsense is just that nonsense, and we're not going to take the bait. I won't take the bait.
Well, we'll see what the future unfolds. The man's in a minority government. We've got to take that into consideration. We must go for a break now, though, and when we come back, we'll be talking about why Vision TV is in hot water again. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. The second issue we're talking about, well, take a look at the headline. Vision TV, once again, focus of controversy. This time, they aired a documentary by a Turkish author, and according to this article, he's argued in the past that Israel is exploiting the Holocaust to justify its actions and contends Darwinism is the root cause of terrorism. Now, the interesting thing is here, this author demonizes Israel, accuses them of all sorts of things that'll unfold as we talk about this, but this is not the first time apparently Vision TV has been implicated, because some weeks ago something similar happened, but I would say in that case it was more overt. This was a Muslim extremist that was spewing poison against Israel and against Jews and hate in general. The big issue here is the TV station says, in this case with a Turkish author, they didn't realize this man had this as a background. To me, this is an example for everybody who is in the field of broadcasting. I mean, to have somebody come on and start spewing something against a nation and preaching hatred, that's one thing. But background checks becomes another. The station did not hold back in its profuse apologies for the first time it aired in a wrong way with this Muslim extremist. This time, however, they say, well, they didn't realize he had that in the background. Which brings us to the question, how many background checks are necessary? What onus does this put on broadcasters? And I mean, I'm asking several questions here. I'm just throwing this out to you. But more importantly, these are the people that exist among us, and they're perpetrating hatred. They're a part and parcel of our society, which makes it very dangerous. It takes things like this to come out in the open for people to realize what is existing among us. What do you think about this? I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think there's the moral issue and there's the legal issue. The legal issue for me is simple, even though it seems like it's in contrast with the moral issue. The legal issue is you own the station, you decide who gets broadcast through your facilities, and it's as simple as that. How many checks do you do? As many as you want to do. Do you want to do any background checks? That's up to you. You own the station. And the government should not intervene. However, morally, as a station owner, knowing that putting a person on your system is going to not only potentially spread harmful falsehoods, but also make your station look as though you are endorsing or somehow sanctioning the views of the person on your TV. I mean, in this case, my understanding is that the actual programs weren't anti-Semitic, but that the people who were hosting them, even if they were just being
Although in the first
weathermen,
case, there was a bit of discrepancy there. That man was just apparently overtly anti-Semitic. This one apparently was not.
I mean, I think the CEO of Vision TV said,
he apologized. He even sent a letter to the National Post apologizing publicly for it.
He had a good analogy, though. He said, would we let Ernst Zundel do the weather on our station? Of course not, because even though Zundel wouldn't be saying anything that's false, well, as far as weather can be predicted accurately, you wouldn't have him on because it would imply that Vision TV would somehow endorse the other views of Ernst Zundel.
But you know what? The Turkish author, I think, from my perspective, is a disgrace. But in terms of the station, it makes you wonder how many other stations do this. Perhaps when you consider how many programs get broadcast across Canada every year, how many people have gone on air with a hidden background or perhaps something in their background that the station just somehow did not get to. Vision TV is definitely being made an example of here, but it certainly calls in more accountability on behalf of broadcasters.
Well, I agree with you that broadcasters have to be accountable. I don't know if I agree with the division that you're making between the legal and the moral implications. I think that the legal system is supposed to protect us from immoral things.
From hate?
So part of the laws that we have are protecting us from immoral things. Immoral things are illegal. If you're promoting something which is immoral, it should be illegal. And I think the government has that responsibility because business, small and big business, have one thing in mind. That's the bottom line. And unfortunately, the only way to keep things in check sometimes is to have a system that follows up. So I think legality is unnecessary. And now, as far as their culpability, how much obligation, whether it's moral or legal, I think that when you're in broadcasting, you have a tremendous responsibility. We have an ancient tradition that says that the wise have to be very careful with the words they use,
it's true,
lest later those words become exploited and cause a bitter end for somebody else. If you're in broadcasting, you have a sacred obligation to protect the public, as you have a sacred opportunity to influence the opinions of people. And it's incomprehensible to me why somebody couldn't do a Google check. I mean, it's so easy to do searches today. You don't have to pay a private eye. You press a button, and in 10 minutes you can have pages and pages and pages of information. Everything is so available. What are they talking about? If they would hire somebody, wouldn't they do a check like that?
Normally I would think so, yes.
I would think so. I think Vision is absolutely culpable, and the fact that when you find the same thing happen only a few weeks later, how could they allow somebody to go on air
on the same program, by the way, Dil Pakistan.
Well, maybe Dil Pakistan has got to go the way of the dodo.
Yeah. Dodo Pakistan.
If this is the kind of stuff that Dil Pakistan is stuck with because they can't find any other people for that program that have kind of a clean slate, well then find yourself a new program. I find that often people on the altar of multiculturalism are ready to sacrifice everything.
Yes.
Including coddling terrorists, including going out of your way to look the other way, in a way which people would never do, in an incomprehensible way. When you're facing evil, well, it's multiculturalism.
Now, it's interesting what you said, because in the article here, Anita Bromberg is quoted, and she's been a guest with us many times, and here's what she said. To have this many strikes against them in a short period of time is a testament to the difficulty, she says, of living in the world today where there are those who will use the cover of religion and multiculturalism to preach hate. She had a very valid point there, because, I mean, this is what fuels people. We were talking during the break about the likes of Christopher Hitchens, who talks about religion poisoning everything. When you've got people using religion as a form of hate, you end up they end up getting credence. And you give credence to these types of people to condemn religion.
I don't know that every religion is a religion of peace. I'm not convinced. Okay, I don't know.
But
that
yet
every
morality and laws came from religion.
Yes,
That cannot be thrown
it
out
is,
the door either.
It is,
Yes.
certainly. I'm not saying we should throw religion out there. That would
Precisely.
sound kind of funny for a rabbi to say. I'm saying I'm not convinced that every religion it promotes peace. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't have to be a good thing. Religion is not necessarily good because it's called religion. If a religion is good, then it's good. If it's moral and it's peace-loving, not that it says it's peace-loving, but that it actually demonstrates that it looks for peace and it looks for inclusivity and it looks to create a moral code that can embrace all peoples and doesn't have a fascist attitude to those who don't look at things like them, then it's good. Religion is not good because it's religion.
I agree with that 100%. And you know, it's not so much even religion. Religion isn't truly even the issue when we're talking about, you know, how far should things go before the state intervenes. To my mind, the issue is, when does erroneous or irrational conduct go beyond belief and into harmful action? When do you start, you know, when should the state intervene? In my code, my political code, it would be as soon as somebody's irrational beliefs lead them to start depriving others of their, you know, their property, their liberty, their life. At that point, that's the role of the government. Step in and provide protection, and if some harm occurs, you know, do the remedial punishment. There's no.
Can I add that I think we have to add, when we talk about harm, we're not only talking about tangible physical harm, we're talking about intimidation.
But the two of you are talking about
psychological harm also.
Yes.
If there's a threat of physical harm, I would think so. Hurt feelings, on the other hand.
No, I'm not talking about feelings.
We have to go for a break, but there's something essential here that I just want the two of you to make a quick comment about, and it was to do with the whole issue of separating morality from legal issues. There tends to be this drive, this movement that says you cannot legislate morality. However, when you look at thou shalt not kill, for example, by the Torah, we have that as part of our legal system. So where do you draw that line?
This has been full of morality.
This has been a huge issue that's been debated by those who were talking about their version of separating church and state. It's loaded.
Law is the encoding of a morality or several, or a mangled group of moralities.
Yes, it is, but that's not being recognized by certain groups.
That's
pushing
correct.
Otherwise.
And to my mind, the dividing line is the physical and the natural versus the mystical, which the government shouldn't be taking into account.
But then the psychological, as you mentioned, ends up being a little bit of a fuzzy.
We talk about life. Life is something which is not natural. There's something more than
we'll have to disagree on that.
Whoa, topic for another show. We're going to go for a break now when we come back. Well, BC is implementing a pilot project. It's about emergency rooms. We'll tell you about it after this. It could change the way we do things in Canada. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. The third issue we're talking about, the headline, BC follows Europe's lead with pay for performance hospitals. Well, this article, as we know, we're facing a problem, wow, it's a universal one, I would say, as the population gets older. Emergency rooms are being filled constantly. There are a lot of complaints we hear across the board with waiting times in emergency rooms. And BC has come up with a $16.4 million venture, and it's basically pay for performance. The faster they can process people in emergency rooms, I guess they're aiming at efficiency, they'll be given more money, as opposed to, here's your load of cash, do with it as you please. You're going to be paid for your ability as a hospital. Is this a good idea? I mean, according to what they've said in Britain, it's been up and down. They've had their negatives, their positives, but overall they say it's translated into some form of success. Rabbi.
I think that there's nothing perfect.
Do you like this
No
model?
system is perfect, but as a rule, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think you need to give people an incentive. You're saying to the hospital that if you earn it, you'll get more money to do what you do better. I think that makes perfect sense.
What
I think
scares
that
me about this,
when you
though?
take away the desire for a person to be successful or to demonstrate success, the drive for victory, the drive to be an enterprising person, you end up with a disaster, a system where people just don't perform. And we've seen that. Communism was a disaster because of this.
Yes.
You need to motivate people. Is capitalism a perfect reality? No, it's not.
Well, critics are actually saying, well, you think it is, I know that. But
even you know that it's not. There are imperfections because people are not perfect. But that doesn't matter because you know what? At the end of the day, you're getting the best out of people. In Torah knowledge, there's this concept of something called nama d'chsufa, called bread of shame, where God makes us work for it so we feel that it's meaningful and that it has value.
do you think it'll lead to carelessness, though? Do you think that exists, where
You
they
think
might
there's-
say, well,
you think there's no carelessness now?
Well, there is. No, I know, but compounded carelessness, put it that way, because I'm in a hurry, so let me rush this person through as fast as I can. That's my basic concern. In the article, the critics say that it's changing it into a profit system, which I'm not sure, to me, that's the biggest argument here, but I'm concerned about the process involved.
I just want to make a point and then
Yes.
give the mic over to you. Is there a possibility that they may speed people through? Yes, certainly there's such a possibility. But remember, you can also put checks to see that not only the service is swift, but that it's effective.
Exactly.
And that people are happy.
And that's needed. Yes.
No problem. But you got to do something to motivate people.
Yes.
That's probably the key question there. The money apparently comes in $60 if you get the person out the door within 2 to 4 hours. That's a scary proposition.
Got to have a contingency.
Well, I mean, what they're saying is we want time efficiency. Not that they want higher performance in the form of better care, but rather they want more bodies moving in one door and coming out the other end. And I think the reason for this, the motivation behind this policy is that we had this decision in 2005 that said if you can't get a person into the hospital soon enough, then the province cannot monopolize health insurance. And so to protect their monopoly, what they're doing is saying, well, we've got to prove in some way that we put more bodies in one door and have them come out the other door. We don't have to prove that they got good care. That's not required by the court's decision. So as I see it, this is a way to take a situation where probably doctors are already working as many people as they possibly can and saying you have incentive to do less with each person. So we're going to ration how much care each person gets further. That's going to cause a even worsening of the system, not an improvement. More people will come in, but they'll be getting Band-Aids for heart attacks. I have no respect for this plan at all, and I think if you want to motivate people, let them do it the good old-fashioned way. Let them make a profit. And let the system be private. Let people, patients
You're talking
pay.
about total privatization.
No, I'm saying let the private system or the private market compete with the public system, and I don't think anyone will want the public system. People, once they know that they can say no to bad care, that they can take their dollar and go elsewhere, will. And that will make sure that all of those, it'll separate the wheat from the chaff. The poor performers, those who don't give good care, will no longer exist, and so the patient will be in control of the quality of the care.
What happens to the poor, though? What happens to the genuine poor?
Well, that's a monetary issue. That's not a health care issue. In other words, if there's I have a problem as a poor person paying for my food or my health or my education, that's a question of money. It's a question of me getting a job and employed. And for
Yes,
those
but
who
I'm
can't
making
work,
minimum wage. I can't afford it. I can't afford to pay for my care. What do I do in a case like that?
you don't enslave your brother. At that point, you have to either make more, improve your skills so that you can make more, find a second job. It's
You'll
not.
always find that.
Can.
Yeah, you'll always find that poor segment.
Has a segment that that can't do better, and we have a moral responsibility to take care of other human beings. You can't say, well, survival of the fittest.
You see, that's the issue I have.
Survival,
You've got to have a contingency for the poor, because I see it as, even if you drive up the wages of the poor some way, you're going to drive up the upper end as well. Everything is relative, so when the lowest bar goes up, the highest bar is going to go up, relatively speaking, as well.
I think what you'll find, though, sorry,
yes,
Christine.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say that what will happen, right now we have a situation where you get everything under one plan. You get back care, you get heart care, you get not only the acute care for horrific situations like a heart attack, etc., but you get care for, I cut my finger. And some things that could
People abuse the system, we know that.
Exactly. And so what will happen also, if you get rid of some of the monopolies that physicians have, let nurses do things, let paramedics do things, and those proposals have been on the table, there will be a multitude of additional workers that will drive prices down, so that if you've got a problem where you've skinned your knee having come off a skateboard and you need 6 stitches, you go to the stitch place. You don't go to the hospital. And the paramedic or the nurse stitches you up, gives you a bill for $40, you pay cash and off you go. But when you have the heart attack, you'll have the insurance plan that cost you less because you didn't have to cover things like split knees and these minor incidents, a sniffle, an ear infection. You didn't bother insuring for those things. And when you don't insure for those small things, the price of insuring for the big things, the big amounts that you need,
I'll tell you
goes
something
right
interesting.
down.
I have a good friend who lives in Norway, and he told me that there it's virtually communist. I mean, the system is so socialized that it's virtually communist. And he said, you don't get care, period.
Yeah.
You just unless you're dying, you're not going to get cared for. He says they don't even give penicillin out.
Right.
I don't know how smart that is. There's a danger in these extremes of taking things to one extreme or another. I don't know if this is the perfect plan. And it's an interesting thought when you tell me that this is actually a way to protect the social system, because I thought that people who are proponents of socialized care would be very angry about this. It sounds like privatization.
Yeah.
You're saying no, this is actually the social activists trying to protect themselves. Okay, I got to admit you're a counterintuitive guy. I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but there is value and there is merit to creating a system where people have to accomplish. People can't just be.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you have a system of decadence. You have a system where people rot, and they don't have to prove that they can do a better job. Maybe it's not just about time efficacy, but that has to be a part of it. To be efficient with your time when you have to be efficient it's a meaningful thing. And when you have a limited amount of time and you have to get the job done, you get it done.
That's right.
When somebody's getting paid to do a job, you're getting paid. Well, how much? Whatever, just do the job,
It's not
a lot
going to
different
stop
when
here,
somebody's getting paid by the hour.
Here.
You have an hour to do this job, but you don't get paid. The job gets done.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. It's not going to stop here. If this takes off across Canada, what's to stop it from perhaps going into the education system? There's problems. There are definitely problems with public education. What about there? What about accountability there in terms of how the kids perform? I have none. I have no problem with revamping a system, but the problem is always, how do you do it?
Same thing.
How do you do it?
Allow competition. Right now, we force people to pay into a school system that they don't necessarily want to use. You're not forced
So are
to use
you
the
for the
public
religious
I'm
education
for whatever
thing?
kind of education you want for your child. Pay directly to the school that you want your child to attend, and you should not be forced by the government to pay for a school that you don't want your child to attend by paying taxes. In other words, education shouldn't be tax funded, it should be parent funded. You pay the school that your child
But you have to have a
attends.
certain number of schools per block. I mean, you could end up with...
That's why we talked earlier. I asked you if you were pragmatic. Realistically speaking, there are people who don't have children, so they say, well, I don't pay into the system. I mean, we have a social obligation to create education for our next generation. It's not such a simple thing. A government that wants to be productive for its citizens has to provide education for its citizens. It is immoral and really illegal by the ruling of the United Nations to fund one specific system, like a Catholic school system, and not to fund other religious systems. I'm not saying they should take away the funding from the Catholics. It doesn't bother me in the least bit. I just think I should have the right to have my children sent to a government-funded school that will teach my ideas or the religious credo that I'm interested in. Now my choice is now, yeah, I can send my child to a Catholic school, and that doesn't look very good for a rabbi, or I can send my child to a public school, and that's not that much better.
I agree with this. It's a horrible
But you know what's
situation.
missing from here, though? The burden needs to be both ways. If you look at this situation in the BC pay for performance, what about those who abuse the system? They go to the emergency room because they have some little fever that just started up, or as you said, some little bruise on their hand, they rush to the emergency room. I mean, the system is being bled by those who just rush for doctor's care and they don't need it. Likewise, the education system. People want better education for their kids. They don't cooperate with the teachers. Their kids a little nightmare in school. school, raising trouble for everybody, but they don't get involved. So it has to go both ways.
If you'd have to pay a $50 premium every time you went to the emergency room, boy, would things change.
You know, I used to feel that way at one point. I used to feel that way, but you know what? A fellow said, a medical critic, that believed that we need to revamp the whole system, and I agreed with him. He says the one downside in that is you're going to have the poor who perhaps they need to take their child to an emergency room, and they won't go, and that kid could end up dead. And that I used to feel exactly the same way. But when I heard that, but there's got to be some accountability.
A token amount. It's funny. You ever see it? You go shopping. People
maybe up to a certain age.
They go running for that quarter. It's an amazing thing. People are going to walk on a snowy day across a parking lot to get their quarter back.
Oh, from the cart.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, for the cart, yeah.
So for a quarter, you have people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars that are returning their cart. Is that unbelievable? What does that say about human nature?
Or maybe the user fees for those over 18, maybe.
Maybe it could be a token $10. Something. I really believe that $10.
You know what? For babysitting service, and I'm gonna again be a troublemaker here. There are people who are using the emergency room as a babysitting service. They've got to get to work. Their kid has a fever. There's nobody to look after the kid, so they dump it in the emergency room. I've heard of this. Really?
Oh,
and for those people, $10 will be nothing.
Okay.
It's beyond mine too. But the kinds of stuff going on in society,
but I don't think you have to deal with
extremes.
That's really an extreme.
You know what? I wish I could say it was an extreme. I wish I could, but I've heard of those cases. Again, from an emergency care worker that says the stuff that people do, the way they abuse the system, it's disgusting, and it needs to be dealt with.
Again, I go back to my shopping cart metaphor.
Well, maybe it's a start too.
People are running across a snowy parking lot for a quarter. Hey, obviously a few pennies makes a difference to people.
Hey, it's healthy just just stretch and reach down, pick up that penny when it's outside the car door.
Okay, bring your pay slip and based on a percentage. Maybe that's the answer. You know what? We're out of time for viewpoints.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yes, it did. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Christine.
We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we'll be talking about using the summer holidays to improve your grades come September. Stay tuned.